"You're useless." The words echoed through the marble lobby of the Al Nasser Financial Center as Sheikh Karim Al Nasser stood in his pristine white kandura and traditional gutra, his face flushed with rage as he pointed at the black man in security uniform standing calmly behind the security desk. Marcus Webb stood in his professional security officer attire, his posture composed and alert despite being publicly berated by the billionaire who owned the entire 30-story financial center where he worked. But there was something in Marcus's steady gaze, a quiet awareness in his eyes as they briefly flickered toward the bank of security monitors behind him, that suggested he knew something important, something he had witnessed during his overnight shift that Sheikh Karim desperately needed to know, but was too angry and contemptuous to ask about. Sheikh Karim's voice rose with each accusation, blaming Marcus for failing to stop a break-in that had occurred 2 nights ago, for being incompetent at basic security functions, for being useless at the one job he was hired to perform. Through the glass walls of the lobby, business professionals arriving for work and visitors waiting for appointments watched the confrontation uncomfortably, some filming on their phones. Behind Marcus, security monitors displayed various camera feeds from throughout the building, and on his desk lay the security logbook, where he meticulously documented every person who entered or exited the facility during his shifts. What happened in the next 48 hours would cost Sheikh Karim a $200 million deal with international investors, destroy his reputation in Gulf financial circles, and reveal that the security guard he had just called useless and fired in front of witnesses had seen exactly who had sabotaged the deal by breaking into offices to steal sensitive documents, and that his moment of casual cruelty had ensured that crucial information would now go to authorities and competitors rather than to him. Marcus Webb had been working as night security guard at the Al Nasser Financial Center for 7 months, one of 3 guards who rotated shifts to provide round-the-clock protection for the building that housed Sheikh Karim's investment firm, along with several other financial services companies. He worked the overnight shift from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, monitoring security cameras, checking identification of anyone entering after hours, conducting regular patrols of the building, and maintaining detailed logs of all activity during his watch. The work was solitary and often monotonous, requiring vigilance during hours when most of the building was empty and dark, except for occasional executives working late or cleaning crews performing their duties. To the executives and professionals who worked in the Al Nasser Financial Center, security guards like Marcus were part of the invisible infrastructure that kept the building safe, but otherwise existed below notice. They nodded to him when entering after hours, occasionally thanked him for holding a door, and otherwise treated him as essentially part of the furniture. Nobody asked his name beyond what was on his uniform badge. Nobody inquired about his background or his observations. Nobody considered that security guards in positions like his saw everything that happened in a building, including things that people assumed nobody important was witnessing. But Marcus was exceptionally good at his job in ways that went beyond just checking badges and watching monitors. He had a natural talent for observation and pattern recognition. He noticed when people's behavior seemed unusual or suspicious. He paid attention to who visited the building regularly, who seemed nervous or evasive, who carried themselves like they belonged, versus who seemed out of place. Over 7 months, he had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of the building's patterns, knowing which executives typically worked late, which cleaning crews serviced which floors, which delivery services came at what times. He documented everything in his security logs, with detailed notes that went far beyond the minimum required, creating a comprehensive record of building activity that he maintained partly because thorough documentation was professional practice, and partly because his instincts told him that someday those details might matter. Sheikh Karim Al Nasser was 51, a billionaire who had built his fortune through investment banking and private equity focused on Gulf region opportunities. He owned the Al Nasser Financial Center and controlled a firm that managed over $3 billion in assets for wealthy families and institutional investors. He was known in financial circles for aggressive deal-making and for maintaining strict confidentiality about his clients and transactions, confidentiality that was essential in the world of high-net-worth individuals who valued privacy about their financial affairs. He was also known for a volatile temper and for treating staff with casual contempt, cycling through employees rapidly because few could tolerate his mood swings and unreasonable demands for long. The crisis that led to Marcus's public humiliation began 3 nights earlier, when Sheikh Karim's office on the top floor of the building was broken into during overnight hours. The intruder or intruders had bypassed building security somehow, accessed the executive floor, broken into Sheikh Karim's private office, and stolen documents related to a major deal he was negotiating with European investors. The documents contained confidential financial projections and strategy details that would be valuable to competitors or to people looking to sabotage the deal. When Sheikh Karim discovered the theft the next morning, he was furious and immediately blamed the security staff for failing to prevent the break-in. Marcus had been on duty that night, and he knew something had happened because he had seen things on the security monitors that bothered him, anomalies in the building's patterns that his experienced eye had caught. But when he had tried to investigate further during his shift, checking certain floors and reviewing camera footage, he had been unable to find clear evidence of an intruder at the time. It was only in retrospect, knowing about the break-in, that he understood what he had actually witnessed and what it meant. And what he had realized was deeply troubling, for reasons that had nothing to do with his own job performance. Sheikh Karim had immediately ordered an investigation of the security staff, convinced that the break-in represented negligence or possibly complicity by guards who had failed to stop it. He had security footage reviewed, logs examined, and staff questioned. And when he found nothing conclusive that explained how the intruder had gained access, his frustration had focused on Marcus as the guard who had been on duty that night. The confrontation in the lobby happened when Sheikh Karim arrived early one morning, specifically to publicly fire Marcus in front of other employees and building tenants as an example of his response to the security failure. He had screamed at Marcus in the lobby about incompetence, about failing to protect the building, about being useless at basic security work. "You had one job," Sheikh Karim shouted, his voice carrying through the marble space. "One job. Watch the building and keep it secure. And you failed completely. You're useless. You're fired. Get out of my building." Several people in the lobby watched uncomfortably, some filming the confrontation on their phones. Marcus stood silently through the tirade, his face calm, his eyes occasionally glancing toward the security monitors, and his logbook as if calculating something. When Sheikh Karim finally dismissed him with orders to leave immediately and turn in his security credentials, Marcus did something unexpected. He calmly collected his logbook, removed a USB drive from the security computer, and began gathering his personal belongings with deliberate care. Sheikh Karim screamed at him to hurry up and get out, but Marcus maintained his measured pace, making sure he had everything he needed. Then he walked out of the building with his head high, carrying documents and recordings that would soon change everything. What Sheikh Karim didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn despite 7 months of Marcus working in his building, was that Marcus Webb wasn't a career security guard who had stumbled into the position. He was a former military police officer who had served with distinction for 8 years before transitioning to civilian security work. Someone with extensive training in surveillance, investigation, and threat assessment. He had taken the security guard position at the Al Nasser Financial Center, specifically because it paid well and provided stable hours after returning from overseas deployment, but he had lost none of his investigative skills or his careful documentation habits developed through military service. Every person who entered the building, every unusual event, every anomaly in the patterns he monitored, was carefully logged, with details that went far beyond what standard security protocols required. And on the night of the break-in, Marcus had seen something that Sheikh Karim desperately needed to know but had been too angry and contemptuous to ask about before firing him. Marcus had witnessed someone entering the building after hours, using what appeared to be legitimate credentials, someone he recognized from previous late-night visits as being associated with one of Sheikh Karim's business partners. That person had gone to the executive floor, had spent approximately 40 minutes there, and had left carrying what appeared to be documents. At the time, Marcus had noted it in his log as unusual, but not necessarily suspicious, since executives and their associates sometimes worked late. It was only after learning about the break-in that Marcus understood what he had actually witnessed was not a break-in by an external intruder, but rather an inside job by someone with authorized access who had stolen documents to sabotage the deal. More specifically, Marcus had recognized the person as being an associate of Sheikh Karim's business partner in the European investment deal, someone who had visited the building multiple times over the previous months during negotiations. And Marcus's carefully maintained logs and security footage showed a pattern of visits that suggested this person had been conducting reconnaissance and planning, learning the building's security patterns and access points before executing the theft. It was corporate espionage from inside the deal partnership, and Marcus had documented the entire thing without realizing what he was recording at the time. Within 24 hours of being fired and publicly humiliated, Marcus had reviewed all his security logs and footage from the past several months. He had compiled a comprehensive file showing the pattern of visits by Sheikh Karim's business partner's associate, the timing of those visits, and most importantly, footage and logs from the night of the theft, showing exactly who had been in the building and when. It was definitive evidence that the break-in was actually an inside job by someone involved in the deal negotiations, someone who had stolen confidential documents, either to sabotage the deal or to use the information for competitive advantage. Within 36 hours, Marcus had contacted several people with that information, but notably, Sheikh Karim was not among them. Instead, Marcus contacted the European investors who were partners in the deal that had been sabotaged. He provided them with evidence showing that someone associated with their supposed partner had stolen confidential documents about the deal. He contacted competitors of Sheikh Karim, who would be very interested to know that sensitive information about his deals was circulating due to internal security breaches. He contacted regulatory authorities with information about possible financial crimes involving stolen confidential client information. And he contacted business journalists with a story about security failures and internal espionage at a major Gulf investment firm, including documentation of how the firm's owner had blamed and fired a security guard rather than investigating the actual insider theft. Within 48 hours, Sheikh Karim's world began collapsing. The European investors pulled out of the deal, citing security concerns and questions about whether their partner could be trusted to protect confidential information when he couldn't even identify insider theft in his own organization. Competitors who learned about the document theft began circulating rumors that Sheikh Karim's firm couldn't maintain client confidentiality. Regulatory authorities launched an investigation into whether client information had been compromised. Business media ran stories about the security breach and the controversial firing of a guard who had apparently tried to document suspicious activity, stories that made Sheikh Karim look both incompetent and cruel. It took several days before Sheikh Karim learned the full scope of what was happening and understood that Marcus, the guard he had called useless and fired, had possessed all the information needed to identify who had sabotaged his deal, but had chosen to share that information with everyone except him. When Sheikh Karim's lawyers finally tracked down Marcus to try to get access to his security logs and footage, Marcus politely declined to cooperate, noting that he no longer worked for the Al Nasser Financial Center and had no obligation to assist someone who had publicly humiliated him and destroyed his employment. The European investors who received Marcus's evidence discovered that the theft had been orchestrated by their own business partner who had been planning to sabotage the deal and launch a competing venture using the stolen information. That partner was immediately removed from the deal and faced legal action. But by then, the damage to the deal was irreversible. The investors pulled out, citing inability to trust any of the parties involved. The $200 million transaction collapsed completely. Sheikh Karim's reputation suffered severe damage. The story of him firing a security guard, who had actually documented insider theft, became a cautionary tale in Gulf business circles about the importance of treating employees with respect and listening before reacting. His firm lost clients who questioned whether their confidential information was secure. His ability to attract new investment was compromised by doubts about his judgment and security practices. The financial impact was substantial and lasting. Before we wrap this story up, I'd like to thank you for reaching this far. And if you enjoyed this story as much as I think you did, then be sure to show your support by liking and subscribing so this channel can reach more people like you. Now back to the story. For Marcus, the consequences were mixed but ultimately positive. He lost his security guard job, but that mattered little given what followed. His professionalism and thorough documentation impressed several security consulting firms who offered him positions at much higher pay. His story became known in security industry circles, and he was recruited to train other security professionals in observation, documentation, and investigation techniques. He eventually built a successful consulting practice advising companies on insider threat detection and security culture. He became an advocate for recognizing that security personnel, like other support staff, often observe crucial information that management dismisses because of assumptions about their capabilities based on their job titles. He worked with professional security organizations to develop better protocols for reporting and investigating unusual observations by guards who might witness insider threats. And he spoke publicly about how treating security staff as invisible or useless could blind organizations to threats that those staff members had actually detected and documented, but were never asked about because management assumed they were too unimportant to have valuable insights. Years later, when asked about the Al Nasser case, Marcus would note that Sheikh Karim's downfall was entirely self-inflicted. If he had treated his security guard with basic respect, if he had asked what Marcus had observed before assuming incompetence, if he had bothered to review the detailed logs that Marcus maintained, he would have immediately identified who had sabotaged his deal and might have salvaged the transaction. Instead, his contempt for someone he considered useless had cost him everything, while ensuring that the information he desperately needed went to everyone except him, shared by a professional who had been insulted one time too many, and decided that his evidence would be better used by people who might actually appreciate the value of careful observation and thorough documentation.